Climate change impacts continue to evolve in California. We're starting to see more variability. This means wetter wet periods, drier dry periods, and those wet and dry periods happening within a given year, not just a wet year or a dry year. Biggest challenges in water management in California today and as we head into the future is understanding what conditions are now, what's coming next, and what's on the horizon. Because it's those three timescales that really understand what actions we should be taking now to conserve when we need to conserve and make sure that we're not harming any elements of the water management system.
Groundwater management and groundwater sustainability is really important because it's a critical part of our water portfolio in California. Any given year, groundwater makes up 30 to 40% of the entire water supply in California, and in a drought year that goes up to almost 60%. So it's imperative that we know what is beneath our feet and how to manage it sustainably. There's over 250 local groundwater sustainability agencies. They all have the authority and responsibility to manage their local groundwater basins, and they need information.
In 2016, the California legislature passed the Open and Transparent Water Data Act, which called on state agencies to make available to the public state-held data that's water and ecological in nature. Since 2016, DWR has put over 400 data sets out on an open data platform. Having data is wonderful, but it isn't solving problems if it's not being put to work. In the water management world, often when we hear infrastructure, what we think of are the hardscapes, the canals and the dams and the levees. However, infrastructure doesn't stop there. In fact, the infrastructure that it takes to make data available in a useful and consistent and well-supported way is no less important than the infrastructure that we think of automatically. Data is sort of an unending goldmine, and it's up to us to tap it. As more of us are trying to accomplish more with fewer and fewer resources, collaboration becomes even more important. Working together by making this data available and then putting it to work, we are in a position to bring together our shared understanding of natural realities.
Public-private partnerships are really instrumental into getting more information about groundwater, working hand in hand with local landowners, local agencies. It is really giving us opportunity to understand their challenges that they face day in and day out. So those interactions, that face-to-face time, is so important in building trust. One of the big things that we've been doing is really building on DWR's legacy of data collection. One example of that is the new statewide airborne electromagnetic surveys. And we surveyed about 100 groundwater basins, and that translated into 25,000 line kilometers of new data with tens of thousands of additional supporting data sets. And that information is all publicly available.
So one of the key elements that has come out of our experience in the early 21st century is understanding the state of the watershed, both in the surface and subsurface, what's coming next in the forecast, and how we leverage that information to make decisions that help us navigate a more uncertain water year. So we look into a watershed and we say, well, what's now? Well, we need to understand how much water is coming into the watershed, measuring precipitation and weather variables. Where does it go? How much is infiltrating into the ground? How much is running off? So getting some stream flow measurements in places that we haven't had. Better understand how water is moving through the watershed. Getting some groundwater observations to understand how the groundwater systems are doing. Understanding that all of this works together to help inform a much bigger space for water management than had existed previously.
We're able to map out preferential pathways from the surface down into the subsurface, where these are the fast paths to get water from, say, flood conditions, where we can take water out of a high flow river, reduce flood risk downstream, but then put that water into the underground through preferential or fast paths so it can get down into the aquifer and subsurface so it can replenish what is being pumped out by communities, farms, and industry in these basins so we can have a sustainable supply.
For decades now, the Department of Water Resources has had a statutory obligation to produce the California Water Plan and update it every 5 years. Specific targets include 9 million additional acre feet of water. If we consider the incredible value that data brings to our management of water and ecological resources in the beautiful state of California. It is a foregone conclusion that it's worth our time and our energy and our resources. You might think of data as a building block, and with all of the data that we can weave into information that in turn can inform our decision making, we are better poised to build our future on the targets that we are expressing in the next series of California Water Plans.